Here we are with another episode of the Family Business where I'm thrilled to introduce Tom Arnold. Tom has been gracious enough to be on the show where we talk about how careers and family are intertwined. Tom, thanks for being here.
Oh, Matt, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we've known each other a long time. And so I would love to get some perspective of you. You have a unique life and career and family. And so we're going to talk it through. First, why don't you take 30 seconds to a minute and just talk about a snapshot quick of where you were for a long time, where you are, or what your situation is, and then we can kind of roll forward with all the fun stuff.
Yeah, so I've been blessed in my career to work for a handful of really good companies and to do a lot of different things. So spare you the pre-business school details, but started at Deloitte Consulting in their healthcare strategy and operations practice. I did that until my first daughter was born, and then quickly realized that that was not the lifestyle that I wanted to lead because it didn't allow me to be the father I wanted to be. So I joined the medical device industry now almost 20 years ago and started working for Guidant. If you've ever met somebody from Guidant, they will tell you it's the best company they've ever worked for,
Yeah.
and they're still looking for the next Guidant. Just a phenomenal organization. And I was blessed to be there at a time where their focus was on grooming general managers. So spent a lot of time in marketing and strategy, and then had a unique opportunity almost out of the blue to go live and work in Europe. One of our smallest competitors was looking for a classically trained American marketer to come over and help build out their global marketing organization. And so the role was in Paris. My wife heard Paris, and I think she was ready to move before I even got the role. And so in the summer of 2010, we moved our three young girls to Paris, France. Spent a couple of years in country there. And while I was there, had the opportunity to really begin to learn and to focus around business model innovation. That took me into the payer space as well. And then, for the last 7.5 years, I've been with Medtronic. First at the Americas region leadership team, really focused on Americas region strategy. And then I've had the privilege to work for Medtronic Diabetes for the last, about 5.5 years, and help, drive more patients to our diabetes therapy. And then, very fortunate to be part of the sales organization calling on the health plans in the U.S. As most Americans can appreciate, health plans often don't make it easy to get expensive products. And so part of my team's role was to go out, work with those health plans, work with the medical directors in those health plans to understand why it was important for every consumer to have access to this critical therapy. So as of right now, I left Medtronic recently and currently working to figure out what I'm going to do next.
It is amazing I've done so much and all the doors that it opens. It's almost like the menu at the Cheesecake Factory. There's just too many options to think about it. And it's almost being penalized for being so successful and all these things that you've done and your reputation being what it is, that you're going to be able to go in any direction you want, which is incredibly exciting, but also a little daunting because I don't know how you get your arms around what you want to do when you could do almost anything. And so what's that been like for you of trying to decide, okay, well, wow, I never stopped. I've always worked so hard. What's it feel like to just have your free days and to think this through and to take your time?
Well, it is a blessing. I've had a couple months now to just kind of figure out what I do want to do next. And whatever I do next is probably going to be the last chapter of my career. So I want to do it right. What I know for sure is what I want to do next is I want to help patients. I thrive on being able to get up in the morning knowing that the company that I'm working for, the role that I'm playing, is helping patients live better, live longer, et cetera, et cetera. So that's going to be a part of whatever I choose to do next. From a functional standpoint, I've spent a lot of time figuring out what it is I do want to do. And as you pointed out, my career has blessed me with a really broad cross-functional skill set. And what I found in my kind of last 4 to 6 weeks is I'm looking to do something in the intersection of business strategy, business model innovation, marketing, which I'm very passionate about, and commercialization. And so we'll see where that lands. I'm excited about some of the things in front of me, but yeah, it has been fantastic. It's also been good. This is a podcast focused also on family. It's caused me to realize that maybe the last couple of years I haven't spent as much time with my wife and kids as I could. And so I took the summer off. First summer I've had off since probably college. And that provided enormous perspective, but most importantly, it gave me the opportunity to spend time with my three daughters, my wife, help my senior in high school through her college recruiting process as a soccer player. And so it's just been a really good blessing for me to be have a couple of months off.
So let's explore that, because I've never done it. So what does it feel like when it's Tuesday and you don't have anything to do? You can wake up whatever time you want, do anything. Like what goes through your head? Are you able to just relax, or you need to have a plan?
I always have a plan. It doesn't mean I can't relax, but my mornings, whether I'm working or not working, start with a workout. I'm up usually at 6 a.m, in the gym by 7, and home usually by about 8:15. That just keeps me sane. It reduces stress. And then I've been blessed to have a spouse that loves doing it as well. And so we work out together, and then that carries over into our nutrition at home. And then maybe most importantly, it allows us to set really good examples for our three daughters. So it starts there. I'm always on the computer a little bit. And especially right now, because I do want to figure out what I want to do. I've spent a lot of time networking, speaking with mentors that maybe I had lost contact with before, and get their thoughts on, hey, you've worked with me. What do you think? And then, yes, I have spent a considerable amount of time doing other things as well. Now, I'd love to tell you that it's been not, a lot of not doing anything. That's not the case. My daughter, I think, employed me almost full time as her chief marketing officer from a soccer perspective. So I have watched probably 100 hours of soccer video, looking for the highlight clips for her, and then I had to teach myself how to actually do highlight clips because I had no idea. And so that probably took me a lot longer than any of your video people to put together a 3 to 5 minute highlight clip for her. And then we've done a lot of touring. My daughter just recently decided she wanted to play in college, and I had no idea what that would entail from a family perspective in terms of how do you engage college coaches this late in the process. And so we've been all over the Midwest, meeting with college coaches, doing college soccer ID camps, et cetera. And so I've actually been, I think, busier since I took some time off than I was before.
So was she a late bloomer athletically? Like, what made her not want to go after this when she's a freshman and a sophomore, when a lot of kids do?
Yeah, that's a great question. She wasn't a late bloomer. I think she had decided a year or so ago that she wanted to go to a big school.
Oh, I see.
A school that would have a Division I soccer program. And she was going to play club soccer, and she was really, really comfortable with that. In her last club season, which started in January of 2022, her club director came to her and said, "Hey, Ashley, do you trust us? We want to try you at a new position." And so they moved her from offense, where she's played her whole life, to defense. And she fell in love with it, became very, very good at it, and came to me and my wife in May and said, "Mom and Dad, changed my mind." And so I was like, "Hey, great. just realized that the whole list of schools that we currently have you planning
Yeah.
to apply to in the fall is now gone. And so we started from scratch, but it's really brought us together as a family. It's been a lot of fun, and it's given me an opportunity to spend a lot of time with, my daughter, who won't be here this time next year. So it's been good.
Yeah, and you've got one already in school, right?
I have a sophomore in Greenville, South Carolina, who's doing great. And then I've got a senior in high school and then a sophomore in high school.
Yeah, I've got a sophomore in high school and a freshman in college, and so I'm living in the same time warp that you are. And so, were you and your wife high school athletes?
I was a baseball player, and had ideas of playing in college until I met with the college coach, and I had made the decision that I was going to go the engineering route. And the coach said something to me that turned out to be really good advice. He said, "Tom, I've never had an engineer on my team, and I don't intend to start now. So
Jeez.
if you want to play baseball, I encourage you to switch to a different major." And while that was hard to hear then, and I'm like, "Oh, what does this guy know?" Hindsight being 2020, and the challenges of engineering school, it would have been very difficult to play Division I baseball and get an engineering degree, at least for me.
So
There's people smarter than me that probably could make that work, but I needed to focus on
there's
studies.
always one or two magical kids who can do that. Most can't because it's just ridiculous amount of time commitment.
Yeah.
Now, was that in Columbia or was that at a different school that you had
That
that
was that was
conversation?
at Columbia.
Yeah.
That was at Columbia. And then my wife, she was a high school volleyball player.
Okay.
So my oldest child was blessed with being really tall, and she became a really good volleyball player. She made the different decision. She said, "Dad, I'm going to pick the school I want. If that happens to be one where I can play volleyball, great. If not, I'll be on the club team." And so she, as a freshman, was the starting middle hitter on the club team, and I think is really happy with that decision. She called home last week and she said, "Dad, uh, the our school's team is done for the year, and so they go into winter training now, but they don't get to play a match until next August." It's like, "I'm on a club team. We have 3 tournaments this semester and 3 more tournaments next semester. This is better than I thought it was going to be."
Awesome.
So, everything happens for a reason. And it's kind of fun to see what your kids are going to decide they want to do.
Well, I always say to my kids and because of what I do, I talk to people about their choices all the time. Look, every decision's a good decision.
Yeah.
At the time, based on the information that you had, it was the right choice. It may not have worked out, but it doesn't mean it was the wrong decision.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I always say, because I coach a ton of youth sports, is we're exactly where we're supposed to be. And that's the way that it normally works. And so it pays off. Now you have a third child. Is she athletic as well?
She does a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
So she has done soccer, she's done volleyball, she's done lacrosse. She also really likes musicals and the theater. And so, I think she's, quote unquote, and these are her words, retired from
Yeah.
more sports than some of my other girls have played. But she just kind of likes to do a lot of different things and doesn't want to settle into any one given thing.
Listen, it's very tough being the third kid when your two older siblings are talented and comfortable with whatever they do, and then you've got to kind of figure out your own way. It's partially why when we were talking about having a third child, I told my wife, "You know what? I don't think I can handle any more than what we've got, and I'm going to stick with 2." And so we only have 2 in my family. My son is a sophomore as well. So I'm curious, though, talking about all this, that when you decided that you were going to separate from Medtronic, how did you sit down with your wife and with your children? Because that's a conversation it may be okay in your mind, but in their mind, they receive that information. They're nervous. They're worried about you. They want to make sure that you're happy financially. I'm sure there's some questions. Like, how did that all go?
It actually went really well. I mean, similar to how I lead, I believe in transparency, and so obviously my wife and I had a number of conversations around this, and let's be clear that Medtronic's taken really good care of me.
Yeah.
So I have the very good fortune to be able to take time to figure out what I do want to do next. And so, that conversation was pretty easy with the family. I think my kids probably wonder, huh, when's dad going to go back to work? But at the same token, they love the fact that dad's more present. And that's intentional as well. And, again, having a senior in high school, I refer to that year as the year of lasts.
Yeah.
In fact, just this morning, we saw my daughter's last soccer game in high school. And so, being able to have that extra time has really been, great for all of us, as I explore what I want to do next.
Was it emotional for her? How did she react to it when the game ended?
I think it was, I think it was more emotional for me and my wife.
Yeah.
You know, I I found myself in the game thinking back to, um, her first soccer practice when all of the other kids were practicing and she was sitting on a soccer ball, and I was like, oh boy,
Here we go.
this is not going to be the sport for her. Or all the endless hours that her and I, spent in the backyard or at the soccer field practicing because she wanted to get better. She came, at 9 years old. She said, "Dad, I want to learn how to kick with my left foot." And so, for the better part of an entire season, she chose not to kick with her right foot just to force herself to learn. And so, those memories were going through my head as the game was going on today. Yeah, it's senior year in high school is hard. I mean, you're really excited for your kids and what comes next, but you know, it's uh it's a nostalgic year.
It is, and you try really hard not to live not vicariously through them, but like live for them. Because
Yeah.
my daughter was making all kinds of big decisions a year ago, like you're going with now. And where I went to school is very different from where she's going to go to school. And I just remember thinking, God, mine was so great. You don't want that? And she's like, no. I said, but it was, she goes, that was you. I don't want what you want. Whereas my son wants exactly what I wanted. I
Yeah.
mean, he's a carbon copy, just better looking. And so it'd be interesting to see, but I'm thrilled for her and she's off to the races and we've already done it once. So you got a bit of experience with it. And so for you, someone who's a fairly successful guy, regimented guy, planner of sorts, this kind of space where you just have all this room to do what you want. It seems like it's been pretty liberating. You seem really happy about it. Is it something that changed you as a person?
Maybe. I think it caused me, if nothing else, it caused me to realize how hard I was working. And do I need to work that hard? And let me be super clear. I come from the Midwest, right? Hard work
Yep.
is part of who we are. And that's never going to change in me. But I think that there's some things that I can do differently. I my motto with my teams for years has been family first. And I have modeled that myself. In fact, I found that it's easy as a leader to say it, but a lot of times your teams don't really believe you until they see you do it. And so, I tell my teams all the time, um, if you have to leave at 3, 4, 5 o'clock to get to the soccer field, the baseball field, whatever that might be, I want you to be there because there's only so many of those opportunities that you get before they're graduated and onto something else. And I think I've done a pretty good job of that. As I thought more recently, it's not uncommon, or it wasn't uncommon over the last 18 months to, especially during COVID, to be on the phone at 6 in the morning, sometimes interrupting my workout, all the way through to 9, 10 o'clock at night with very limited breaks. And that's just not healthy when you can't have a family dinner.
Yep.
Family dinners are important to me. And if I have to be on a call in family dinner, I miss it. That's an opportunity for me to talk to my kids and my wife about how their day was before they go up to their room, get on their phones, do everything else.
Yeah, I mean, I coach a ton of youth sports, so I'm a huge believer in parents showing up, and I send constant emails, even at this age, high school age, on my son's team. I still remind them we have a game. It's not just a text group to the kids because say what you want. There isn't a kid alive who doesn't like hearing people shout his or her name and their parents being there, even when they bother them with pictures and they bother them with, are these your friends? You know, that kind of stuff where they embarrass them. There's nothing quite like it, you know, and it's amazing the impact that it has, because I can assure you from 30 years of doing this that they notice if you don't show up and their friends' parents do. And so it's great that you've made time for this, because I can assure you your kids will never forget it. And when their parents, they'll do it because they saw you do it. And I always know that about my kids. There's no way that my son's not going to be a coach. I've been coaching since I was 18, and so he's going to be the same. He already could at this point, honestly. And so that's just terrific. Now, one thing about you that's interesting is that you've worked for some substantial corporations. And I always wonder about that. Is there an itch to try something startup-y and something emerging, or this is your lane and you feel great about it and this is where you want to stay?
Yeah, there's definitely that itch. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about that right now is, you know, I've learned a lot in my career, and have had opportunities to go small before. My mentors had encouraged me, the time's not right just yet, Tom. You know, spend a little bit more time at the bigs. You know, everybody tells me, Tom, you got to go small. And maybe small isn't the right word, but I'm actively in conversations with a number of growth equity companies, as well as you know, venture capital backed organizations that are either preparing to commercialize, or you know, maybe need you know, a little bit different leadership in the commercialization space. So we'll see what happens next. The other thing that's really fascinating, you know, I've been in med device a long time, and it was always the case with U.S. medical device companies, and or you know, any medical device company for that matter, is that you commercialized in Europe first, because you could easily get a CE mark regulatory approval in Europe, which would allow you to then to build out additional clinical evidence, really begin the commercialization process, start to make some money while you waited on FDA approval. And with the new regulatory environment in Europe, it's shifted completely the other way. It's now easier to get approval from the FDA than it is in Europe. And so the other interesting thing that I'm finding is there are a number of organizations outside of the United States that have products ready to be commercialized. They're waiting on European approval, and they believe they're going to get FDA approval here first. And so, you know, they're hiring, you know, presidents of the U.S. To build out the commercial team here in the U.S. versus in whatever country they're currently based. So, you know, that's something I didn't fully appreciate until I started this process a couple of months ago.
So it's that old saying, if you don't know what you don't know, and the more people you talk to who are experts in PE and VC and those kinds of things, then you get more knowledge of this, and then you learn about, you didn't realize MDR was affecting it that greatly, and now it changes your perspective on this, and it opens up opportunities and lets you think about things that, I never considered that before. And now, I mean, look at you. You were cardiac and heart failure for quite a bit, and then moved over into diabetes, and then moved out of traditional marketing and commercial side to something a bit more payer related and things like that. Like you've already evolved a fair amount.
Yeah, I've been really lucky.
Oh, come on. It's you. Stop it.
Well, obviously I put myself in a good position to be successful. But I have been blessed with really good leaders that I've had the opportunity to work for. Some which I've learned so much from in terms of how to take care of your employees. In fact, the best leader I ever worked for was back at Guidant. I won't share her name now, but she knows who she is.
Yeah.
You know, that woman was a masterful leader, a people leader, and gave me my first start. But watching how she led our team, how she really brought the entire team's families into everything that we did, I've been able to emulate that as a leader. But you know, you're right. You're right. I have had the opportunity to do a lot of different things. and they've all built on each other. So, a lot of time in downstream marketing in particular. Then more of a transition to franchise leadership when I was over in Europe, where I led the entire, heart failure and ICD franchise. And so that was upstream marketing, downstream marketing, portfolio management. And then something that I don't talk about that often, and what got me ultimately to Medtronic, was a pivot while I was at Soren Group in Europe. We had been in the US for 20 plus years and had never cracked the 1% market share barrier. Even though in Europe, in Japan, and other parts of the world, Soren was, 20, 30% market share in some of those markets. And so the CEO gathered 10 executives from around the world. I was fortunate to be one, and said, we're going to try something different. And so they hired a blue ocean strategy consulting firm and took the 10 of us and trained us on blue ocean strategy. The idea of finding uncontested market space. And they basically took the 10 of us, split us into 2 teams of 5, and said, your mission using these blue ocean strategy tools is to identify one or more disruptive business models that we're going to go into the US with and try something different. So 4.5 months later, often night and weekend work, we presented 7 concepts to the CEO and his leadership team. I was a bit humbled to find out that my concept, this idea of going direct to payer, was something that they wanted to move forward with. In fact, so much so that a couple months after that happened, I received a call asking to move back to the US a year early to be part of that execution team. So we reluctantly moved back in the summer of 2012. We were enjoying Europe and looking forward to year 3. But that experience is something that was super valuable then. But now, as I consider going to a smaller organization, it was me and 3 other people. We essentially were a startup within Soren Group at the time, with a mission to commercialize these new business models. And so while it's not a perfect one-to-one, it's pretty close to what I think I would need to be doing, at least in terms of the mindset, should I go to a smaller organization.
So let's walk through that a step. So how'd that conversation go? You come home and you tell your wife, we got to go. And I'm curious how that was received.
Well, it's a funny story. I was actually in the United States. Soren, I was a finalist for a vice president of business development role in Europe. And they had asked me to go to the US and take a week-long course in negotiation and business strategy at Kellogg. And so I was literally in that course, got a phone call, and stepped out of the room where, this news was kind of dropped on me, right? CEO wants you to go move back to the US and help execute. So instead of being face-to-face with my wife, this is, back before FaceTime, I called her on a break from Chicago. She was in Paris, and I said, hey, they want me to come do something different. It's pretty cool, but it takes us out of Europe. And I think we were both a little disappointed, not in the opportunity, but we all benefited personally from our time in Europe. In fact, my kids today, for many years after we returned home, kept asking, when are we going to move back to Europe? Which, in hindsight, that just makes you feel great. But we were initially disappointed. The kids were excited when we told them. I remember we told them, I think on Mother's Day, when I got back to Europe, and we have a video of it. They were screaming and hollering, "Oh, I get to see my other friends again!" So, but it was a unique experience, and it turned out great. Maybe the most important thing, and I haven't shared this enough, I wouldn't be anywhere where I'm at in my career if it wasn't for my wife.
All right, let's talk about her. Who is she? What does she do? What has she done?
Yeah, so my wife Renee is a very intelligent, passionate individual, strong woman. In fact, at the gym, she's probably the strongest person in the gym. She can outlift me, at least from a legs perspective, which keeps me motivated. But she's just a great role model for our girls. But when we made the decision to move to Europe in the first place, I had done all of this research, and all of the research said that it was going to be really easy for me to move. But it was going to be hardest on the traveling spouse. And so I was so worried that, it was going to be really, really hard on her. None of us knew French, et cetera, et cetera. But, her mindset was, this is an amazing opportunity for us. We're going to go do it. We're going to figure it out. It might be challenging, but that's going to be part of the fun. And those were her words. So we get to Europe, and she just embraced it. I remember it was maybe in the first month we were there, my wife starts making travel plans. I'm like, oh, honey, we got a lot of time to explore Europe. Why don't we take this first year to kind of just get settled in Paris, and then we'll spend years 2 and years 3, exploring Europe. And her response back turned out to be incredibly prescient. She said, we don't know how long we're going to be here. We need to make the most of our time that's here. And so literally within a month of being there, we were doing our first road trip to Switzerland and Germany. And, because of that, we visited 25 different Western European countries while we were in Europe. And
Holy
we were
cow.
only in Europe for 2 years.
How old were your girls at the time?
When we moved, they were 3, 5, and 7, and they were, I guess 5, 7, and 9 when we came back. So my kids they've seen the world by this point. But yeah, my wife is a very, very special person. Has sacrificed a lot, including her career. She was a very successful IT professional. But she, when we had kids, she decided, our kids are the most important thing, and chose to stay home. And my kids have benefited from that as well. So, and it's allowed me to do the things that I've been able to do in my career, where if I had a working spouse, I'm not sure we would have been able to do the same thing.
Is she there? Can we say hello?
She's not, unfortunately. She's, surprisingly, she's at school with my daughter, who's a sophomore.
Yeah, it really is an amazing relationship and partnership that goes into this, not just the family piece, but all of these career choices and decisions that you make, and all these conversations that you have, getting their perspective, because sometimes they can still surprise you after 20 years of marriage. I've been married for 20 years, and there's sometimes my wife says something, I go, you really feel that way? And she goes, I think I do. And we're like, wow, I didn't know that. And so it's I think that's the fun part about it, is the adventure continues. It doesn't end. One thing that I ask parents who have educations like yours, I'm not sure where your wife went to school, but I mean, you obviously have a significant education, Columbia and Michigan. Is it hard for your girls academically? Do they look at you and go, I'm not going Ivy League, or I don't want to go Ivy League. I could, but I don't want to. Like, do you just leave that at the door, or how do they try not to disappoint you or compare themselves to you?
Well, I don't let them compare themselves to me. To me, they are who they are, and I want them to be their persons. As a father, there's a couple of things. One, I have told them since they were old enough to understand, perhaps as early as 5, that as hard as it is for me and your mom, we need you to be at least 250 miles away from home when you go to college. And they've heard that. They've heard me say that to them probably 100 times in their lives. And it's not that I want them far away. Trust me, I would love to see them as often as I possibly can. But the experience that I had, being a Minnesota boy going to New York City, and having to figure things out on my own. When problems came up, I had my friends to rely on. I couldn't come home for the weekend. Yeah. I couldn't come home and wash my clothes, or have my mom wash my clothes, or those kinds of things. And I had to establish a completely new friend group, because my friends at home were at home largely, except the ones that were doing the same thing that I was doing. And so that's really been the big focus that I've had for them. The second big thing is, I want them to go to the best school that they can. And so the choices that they make relative to where they go should be academically based and or based on what they want to do after school. Not some of the other criteria that's out there. And so that's probably as far as I've pushed it. As it relates to Ivy League, my two oldest, that's not what they wanted to do. They wanted to go smaller. And so, my oldest is a sophomore at Furman University, a school of about 2,500 kids in beautiful Greenville, South Carolina. My senior in high school is also looking at the small liberal arts school route. And quite frankly, religion might be in her future.
Really?
And so she's looking at Wheaton College and some of those other really, really strong Christian schools. And then my youngest, I don't know. I remember way back when I was figuring out where I wanted to go to school, and I had a different mission than them. I wanted to get into the best school I could get into. And so my dad understood that goal, and he helped me figure out which ones we would be able to afford. And Columbia for me had need blind admissions, and my dad had done all that research to figure out, okay, if I get in, could we afford to go there? And so he helped me with that. But he bought this book. It's called The Fisk Guide to Colleges. And so when my first daughter was getting ready to go, we bought the book. And so that book has now been passed down to my middle child. And then my youngest pulled it out this weekend and said, hey, I want to start thinking about school. I'm like, okay, great. And so I don't know if she'll be Ivy League, but she seems to have a different perspective on what she wants to do next. So I think she may go bigger. She's got, I'm the oldest in my family of 5 kids. 4 of us have MBAs from the University of Michigan. And my sister also went to undergrad at Michigan, met her husband at Michigan, and my brother John met his wife at Michigan. So there's, I don't know, I've lost count of how many Michigan connections there are. But Michigan may be one of the options for her as well.
Yeah, I going through it, I would say the first thing that I would tell any parent is you're going to learn things about your kid that you didn't know. And it's very possible that they don't know it either. Like my daughter threw us a bunch of curves. The majority of the schools we visited, she never even applied to. I'm like, Olivia, you kind of missed the boat on this. We went, you liked it, and now you're not applying there. Okay. And so where she wound up, she had gone there, the tour, so it's not like it came out of nowhere, but it was not what I expected.
Yeah.
And it worked out great. She always wanted to be in Manhattan. She's going to be there. And so that was her thing. Her thing was the city more than the school. It turned out the school is a great school, so it all worked out, but my wife and I look at each other like, did you know she was going to do that? And I said, I don't know. And I mean, you were on the tour, weren't you listening? And so this is the way it is. And I'm doing it again in a couple of years, and you're doing it again in a couple of years too. And they're probably going to surprise you as well. And that's what makes it fun, because you really find out their identity and their independence and their choices that they make and why they make them. And so I only had one rule. We don't chase any boys or girls. You make the decision based on you.
I have the same rule.
That is not a reason. Also,
my dad told me that years ago. And my wife and I were high school sweethearts.
Oh, is that right?
And she went to school in Wisconsin, and I was in New York, and she visited 2 or 3 times a year. And we saw each other in the summers and holidays. But it worked out for us. And I've told my girls, I said, hey, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be, and it'll work out. And
that's an amazing story. Let's explore that for just a minute. So, are you the same age?
We are. We were both juniors in high school when we started dating.
All right. So you've known each other for however many years that is. Yeah, we'll just leave it at that. And so, I mean, look, I went to. Did she go to University of Wisconsin in Madison?
She was at a smaller Wisconsin school.
Okay. So at least you had a smaller number of people, but it's still very difficult at that age to stay together. That's really impressive. So how did, because back then there wasn't FaceTime, there wasn't the ability to speak as often. You know, how did
Yeah.
you continue that? I mean, that's truly out of the ordinary.
It is. In fact, we were talking about that not that long ago. That remember calling cards?
Yeah, sure.
That's what we needed to use, right? Until your calling card was maxed out, you couldn't use it anymore. So, I think we went into it with a lot of trust. We had grown really close in high school, and that has to be part of anything that you're going to do when you're going to be that far away. And then we did it the old-fashioned way. We wrote letters.
Yep.
So I have hundreds of letters from my
Oh,
wife
that's great.
that I kept from way back when. In fact, I think we found them recently. But that's what we did. And then when we were together, the cool thing was I was in New York, one of the best cities in the world. And so when my wife would come visit, then my girlfriend, we always did something fun when she would come out.
You're a romantic. Who knew? That's awesome. Well, look, you've been every bit as interesting as I thought you'd be. We've known each other a long time, but I certainly learned a lot about you. So thanks so much for doing this. This has been Tom Arnold and the Family Business, where we talk about how careers and families are intertwined. You were terrific. Thanks so much for being here.
Hey, thanks, Matt. It was really a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Take care.